My name is Carl Quo, and this is Founder Quest, a podcast about the journeys of starting a game studio. Irena is a kindred spirit for me. She founded Unleashed Games in 2023 to pursue making games that tackled social design and brought players together. This is something that I'm also super passionate about, and in many ways founded Jam & Tea Studios under the same principles. She hasn't always wanted to start a studio, but after spending a career at places like Scopely, 38 Studios, and Blizzard working on World of Warcraft, she didn't see anyone currently focused on the problems or opportunities that she was most passionate about in the social space. Sometimes, if no one else is doing it, then you have to take the lead. This is something that's led me to start companies, to start the Game Founder podcast, as well as the Game Founder support community. And so Irena and I chat a lot about that, and I really enjoyed my conversation with her. I hope you do as well. Let's jump in.
The place that I always love to start the conversation at is there was a moment where you're like, yep, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start a company. I'm going to start a game studio. I'm emotionally and intellectually committed to this path. And eventually that became Unleashed Games. But what led up to that moment and what sort of drove you to make that sort of internal commitment that this was the journey you were going to go on?
I was in the shower, actually, where all my best ideas happen. But I saw the trajectory, and this was probably around, I think it must have been 2019, maybe even all the way as far back as 2018. Mm-hmm. And I saw some of the public tenor and, how we were treating each other. The Trump administration did not do good things for us socially in terms of how kind we are to each other. Mm-hmm. And I was seeing my kids playing more and more video games that were prioritizing direct combat. And I was wondering where the games were that we used to actually have a lot more of that helped facilitate and drive like players helping each other. Mm-hmm. Where are all the PvE products at? Where's the Fortnite but for PvE? And I know that they did save the world, and then that didn't necessarily work out. But the battle royale, like the PvP version, won that battle, ironically. But where were the games where we had to work together to solve problems? Mm-hmm. And I realized that, why not me? I think I had heard like a podcast or something, like, if you can do it, like, why not you? Because if somebody else isn't doing it, then I guess it's on you to solve that problem. And also I was gaming more and more with my kids. I was playing Stardew Valley and having so much fun. And I was playing, we played a lot of It Takes Two, actually. Even for the heavy narrative content. It Takes Two actually turned my two little ones, not that she's so little, but my two youngest, took them from being, mortal enemies to being friends by the end of them playing it. Like, there was something really magical that happened. And so all of that motivated me to, make the game that I wanted to play with my kids, because we actually really were looking for it, and it wasn't there. It wasn't on the PlayStation Network. It wasn't in, there wasn't even a category for co-op on Xbox. I'm not sure if there even is now. But, I worked on World of Warcraft, one of the greatest collaborative games of all time. And I couldn't think of anybody better suited to kind of lead this charge. a WoW developer who's now also a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And now wants to run dungeons with her kids and, is forced to have to make them play Diablo, which I am not going to be mom of the year doing that. And I still let them. So my sons are, acclimated to exploding, rib cages and eels flying out of giant bodies. Oh God, what did I do?
Yeah. That's amazing. Did you have any sort of prior, was this the first time you had been like, I should start a studio, or is that something you had thought about earlier in your career?
Well, so I had actually been a part of a small startup team building a mobile title back in 2015, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a remote team of about 15, some in Japan, Australia, Poland, us domestically here in the US. And we built, okay, I got to take a deep breath. A match 3 or a multiplayer PvP match 3 RPG TCG.
Amazing.
And I was the creative director on the project. It was called Chief Puzzle Officer, and it was a game of corporate espionage.
Excellent.
I was so proud of this game. All the art was like deep anime. Except you had a corporate headquarters that you could, furnish and, create meeting rooms, but then you could go and raid other people's corporate headquarters. Like it was a game that had like the kitchen sink thrown at it. And I really got to experience what it means to be a startup founder in that context, because you do everything.
Yep.
Like even as creative director, I was still loading up Unity, doing testing, making changes in the build, pushing changes. And I loved it. I absolutely loved how flexible I could be with my skill set. Because my background is actually engineering. And being able to be hands-on, but while also getting to set direction, it felt like I had a lot more agency and a lot more contribution to the game. And everybody on the team did. And that was my favorite part. So after having worked on giant teams at Blizzard and at Scopely, at Warner Brothers, where it felt like you kind of were fighting against the tide just to make a change. Or if you wanted to make a change, you'd have to go through like 5 different levels of approvals. And if somebody along the way disagreed with you, you'd either have to go into a long battle, build a really extensive pitch deck for, a minor concept, or you had to let it go. I felt like I was Julie Andrews on the hills of the Alps. But, coming at it from I guess maybe I underestimated the amount of work that it would be, even in that context, being a startup CEO and a startup, like from that perspective, and how hard it would be. But it certainly gave me the naive optimism of like, yeah, I could do this.
Yeah. I mean, I think having that sort of brush with a startup team, one, I 100% agree that sort of being like startups really reward generalism, right? And everyone, all hands on, and folks who want that sort of experience. And I've seen lots of folks who that is an anathema to their entire being. But for the folks like us who love that kind of environment, right? Like it's intoxicating. It's something you want to go back to. And working in those larger companies, to your point, can be, you feel reduced to your specialization. You feel like there's a lot of challenges to get that sort of direct sense of agency. But inevitably, every journey is harder than you think it's going to be walking it, right?
Legit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so let's talk about that for a second. You have this moment in the shower. You're like, I'm playing these games with my kids, but there's just no one's making the right kind of games. No one's making enough of these kinds of games. I have the background. I have the experience. Why not me? If I see a change in the world, why don't I go be the change in the world? Which is a motivation in line that, really resonates with me. I feel like there's been multiple points in my career where I've taken leaps exactly because I'm just like, well, this doesn't exist, so I'm just going to go do it. what were the big learnings from that moment in the shower through the actual founding that you're like, man, this was a learning that I went on about making this decision and committing to it, that if I met someone on the street who was like, I'm thinking about starting a game studio, you would be like, okay, here are the things you should learn from my journey.
Oh God, yeah, and it's really funny. This is a phenomenal question because when I meet new founders, and as like a speedrun founder, I actually get a lot of like young founders, and I don't mean that necessarily by age, but those who are fresh founders. There we go.
There you go.
Who are looking to kind of make their mark and take their shot, and I find that the song and dance that we have to do as founders actually tends to like live in an opposite realm of where we need to be as developers and as creators. And that dichotomy is frustrating, and it can be frustrating. And I had no idea how powerful my Google Slides skills would become when I joke that my career trajectory completely changed when I realized Google Slides is my primary development tool. You're shifting away from, Unity scripting in C# or, your knowledge of blueprints. And no, y'all, you're aligning left a lot and making sure your fonts are clean. But, a lot of people come to me when they meet me, and I teach. I teach at New England Institute of Technology. I just took on a class this term. I'm teaching entry-level game development, HTML and JavaScript. And, I run into a lot of like very motivated young people because that giving back and doing that sort of, mentoring work and encouragement work is really deeply aligned with my mission as well. And I often hear the phrase, I have this game idea. Have you ever had like, how do you emotionally react when you hear knowing what you know now to like say, oh, I have this idea for a game. Can I tell you about it?
I think it's very much brings out I don't have a lot of Midwestern in me, but it brings out the Midwestern in me of like, oh, bless your heart.
Oh, honey. Oh, honey.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've come to the realization as a game developer that just as a software developer in general, that everybody has an idea. Everybody has an app idea. And an idea is a dime a dozen. And the difference between an idea and founding a company is how you're going to bring that to life.
Yep.
And how do you understand it? Like I actually just met with and advised a team that have an incendiary app idea, like crazy app idea. And here I am like, well, have you considered the cloud compute costs and your server costs? And what does that do to your margins? And are you targeting this market because then your app brands this way? Or if it's a different market, you have to brand it this way.
Yep.
And these pieces, like not only do you have your game, but you really, as a founder, you really need to understand who the hell you're going to sell to and why they're going to buy. Because that's the other half, the more important half, arguably, especially as now we're at like 100,000 games on Steam. It's not just about your game, my friend. And probably your game is already made. And in fact, they've used your name that you've dreamt about for your title, the retail mage, amazing, amazing. Carl, all of it. But it's the idea is probably only about 10 to 20% of the battle.
Yeah.
The rest of it is how are you going to get people to see it? And then how are you going to get people to pay for it?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting jump that folks have to go through on the founding journey of you're not founding a game or building a product. You're founding a business. And so much of that business is, all the things that go around the initial core idea of here's this need and here's this idea I have to solve that need, right? But then it becomes all of this, like, how many people do you have? Like, what does that do to your costs? What is your source of money? What is your blah, 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 right? And I think so much of the conversations I tend to have is helping to take people on the journey, because I think it's a easily traversable journey, but you have to know it's there. Otherwise, you're going to end up in the swamp very easily, right? And so it's like exactly what you said of like, okay, cool. So that's a great idea. But have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And how is that a business, right?
What's the flow?
Yep.
How are you creating that funnel to draw in users, bring them in, monetize them, retain them?
Yeah.
And then, and how do you balance the churn, and how long are they sticking with you? Like, all of these product things are incredibly relevant in any business. And
Yep.
it's a business plan. And just because if you have a cool game that you want to build and you can build and you can build it yourself, do that. Be an indie developer.
Yep.
But if you want to build a business, like, that's when you become a founder.
Yep. So you choose to go on this path, this insane path that, both you and I have decided to take on.
Sorry.
As you're building it out, how do you start to build that group of folks to go with you, both at the sort of like initial team or like initial collaborator level, but also, how did you make decisions around bringing on co-founders, finding people to go on the journey with?
So this is where my story gets a little bit complex, because I actually had a different founding team, and we actually founded a different company. So I came up with this concept of Unleashed Games, and I started building out a pitch deck for it. And then I approached two individuals, spaced apart, to form a company, and they didn't like the name Unleashed Games. So we had a naming exercise, and we rebranded, and we became a company called Rainbow Unicorn Games. And I, in my idealistic self, I wanted to build a equal share, like, council of leaders, where the three of us, we were all femme or non-binary, founders building games for diverse audiences by diverse developers, and wanting to build games that expanded out what the market of games could be. And it was so idealistic. It was everything that I wanted it to be, a beacon of hope for diversity and inclusion, and just be making games that, like, aren't hypersexualized, and actually, for women. We had this phenomenal concept, which they're still developing, called Romancing Jan, which is a Jane Austen turned into like a romance narrative game. Super cool. And nothing like that would get approved through any sort of like green light council, like, at Scopely, Warner Brothers, Sony, whatever. Nobody would ever build that game in the classic game industry. And so I learned the ropes, essentially, of fundraising around that company. But then founder conflict ended up seeing me, and also there was a very dramatic moment in my life. And this is a story, I actually told this at GDC, at a CEO panel. But I had actually asked a friend of mine, or for my team, for a friend of mine to join the company. And he happened to be a really phenomenal game developer, working on World of Warcraft, Diablo 3, the itemization designer for Diablo 3. And I was bringing him in to come and work with us, but he actually was suffering from his own mental health struggles and ended up succumbing to taking his own life. And part of that was actually something that I was witnessing, as it's a growing problem, particularly amongst young men, of, increasing loneliness and struggles with mental health and increasing suicide rates. And so I kind of stepped away from my company, lost my friend, and then went to his memorial, where I found my former teammates from Team 2 at Blizzard. And like, we wanted to do something. We wanted to solve the problem. And how could we do it? The number one way to get to this category of people is through video games, because we could reach them the fastest. And perhaps maybe we could affect them by building a game that's all about relationship building, which was going back to that original concept of like the game that I could play with my kids, like a PvE game. And I had, now WoW developers flocking to me. And that's when like it felt like, it felt like Travis Day is his name. He had Hearthstoned us all together, and kind of in his posthumous self brought together the team that built Unleashed games. And we were also deeply, deeply personally motivated because we saw a problem that we could solve that no other category of product could solve, the same way that video games can solve this problem of loneliness.
Yep. Super agree.
So it was a gift.
Yeah. I had the opportunity and am very grateful that I got to work with Travis Day briefly at Phoenix Labs before the pandemic. So I know him. I'm not as
now.
well, but super well. But yeah,
I'm going to cry. Oh, I'm so glad that you know Travis. That's wonderful to hear. So yeah, go ahead and tell me you remember Travis.
Yeah, I remember Travis. I mean, he was an amazing guy, an amazing developer. And it was a pretty big loss across the industry. And I know that I have a big network of folks who were at Blizzard and obviously knew him during the heyday of World of Warcraft and all the work he did there and throughout Blizzard. And so that definitely rippled through, my entire network. And I remember that moment. And to your point, exactly to your point, it feels it's a moment like that is awful and heartbreaking, but also, has that ability to help put a spotlight on the things that are the most important, and the impact you want to have in the world. And bring people together, right? And so I think Travis especially would be, super grateful and happy that, not that we should be happy that any of that happened, but that at least out of it, a group of his friends came together to solve this really great problem. And I think we've spoken about this before at shows and on LinkedIn, but a big part of JM&T Studios is to tackle loneliness through games. And we're very aligned on that being a huge problem and the role that games should be having on it and are not, right?
There's a responsibility, as we build content that drives people into single player experiences, we're, using like compulsion tricks. Mm-hmm. These are, as a UX designer, that's my craft. It's my job and as a game designer, to draw people in and do the things that I want them to do. And if they're spending deep amounts of time playing solo content, it's actually at a deficit to their ability to be able to reach out and connect with others. So, and we can do both at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, games, my stump speech has always been that if you look at any civilization through time, when they unearth a new city or a new archaeological dig of here's this tribe that we've never found before, there's always a game at the center of it, right? Communities have always been brought together by games and play, and that's been a huge forcing function of how we build connection in tribe throughout the course of humanity. And I think it's only in the last 30 years that games have become such I play alone concept, and to your point, I think that's changing and that's good. There's a lot of multiplayer games now, but so many of them are just, war games and focused on violence as the only agency, right? And there's room for a lot more. There's room for ways to create more of that. When I was working on League of Legends, part of the founding of the player behavior team was exactly to your point of the commitment we have of like, hey, League of Legends is kind of replacing Little League, right? Like it's what kids are playing instead of Little League, instead of soccer clubs, instead of this stuff. We therefore have a commitment to teach sportsmanship in the same way that those programs would, right? And so how can we start to do that? And there's plenty of arguments around whether or not we were successful, right? Like there's a lot of data that we had access to that we were making an impact, but like I think there's still a lot of room to go, right? But jumping back to your founding journey, before we get lost in just nerding out about social design for an hour.
We could do that. It would be so much fun. Anyway,
sorry. That can be another podcast. We'll do another podcast all about social design.
You can come on to my play test and we'll talk about the nuances of social design.
Super happy to. So you have this moment. You decide to recommit yourself to sort of Unleashed Games and really making games that tackle loneliness by bringing people together and helping connect them to others. You have a bunch of folks that you knew from working on World of Warcraft who are interested in this. Take me through how you sort of decide what that initial team is and who, I often sort of make this distinction of there are people who are early employees who are like, in many ways on the founding journey, sort of like you were at your previous experience, right? They're deeply committed. They're generalists. They're in the trenches. In many ways, they have this sort of founding journey. But there's also founders who truly have the burden of the business on their shoulders and are thinking about like, we are building the business around us, especially when you start talking about investors and funding, all that kind of stuff. It really comes down to like, who is the founders and then who is the early team? And so as you're sort of recommitting yourself to this path, how did you think about what do I need in both of those buckets and how do I go find them?
It was interesting because the journey of finding that team, that initial team, was a process in and of itself that happened before we committed our first line of code or before we raised our first dollar. And I think timeline wise, it was in 2022 in August that we lost Travis. I formed Unleashed Games in August of 22. And then from that point on through the end of the year was selecting, I needed a technical co-founder. And so I found Dave Cham, who was at, and still is technically running a third-party development team of about 30 engineers. Because one of the reasons why I thought he was a great pair was he'd built games himself. He's very hands-on, and he has a perspective of everybody who joins the team needs to be able to get their hands in engine and needs to be comfortable with that because we are not bringing on any talking heads because that's a waste of money. But also he had at his fingertips a deep engineering team that we could flex. Like we get some cash and we could grow out, get some major progress on our build and bring it down. And he's also built for mobile, for console, and PC, and also was our tech director at 38 Studios, where he deeply understood the needs for building an MMO style game that we are building. So he was really like one of my first early identifiers of like, I need to work with this person. And so Dave came on board and he has been a phenomenal hand in making sure that we can execute. And he's, again, one of those multi-talented people who can code, who has an artist bone, that kind of thing. And same thing with Chris Zierhut, our game designer. I wanted somebody who understood game loops to be in charge of design. And we created this role of chief design officer, where regardless of whatever games that we made, he understood the assignment of creating social loops that compel people to retain and to engage. making sure that we took those lessons from MMOs, and regardless of the product we ended up producing, we would have some of those learnings. And specifically because we wanted to build online social spaces. Like, we're building more social network, and that's what a proper MMO is. It's more social network than it is game. But it's like a bar essentially, and then you go and hang out at the bar, and you hang out, then you find your friends, and then you figure out what to do once you get there, and building play patterns like that. And then our team really grew from there, of folks that were just like willing to dive in, but bringing in such heavy hitters from Blizzard. I had, Chris actively was working at Blizzard for quite a while and didn't leave until we fully, we got into speedrun and we got our first cash in the door. And I don't know if our team took a more traditional route where we, all sat down and started building together. It was more, we all agreed that we would get together and I would get the resources to be able to pull them away from their work, and we would, go to town. And that was incredible. So I think the journey from start of the idea to getting our first investment and checking in our first code was about 10 months, and we even announced our fundraising initially at GDC of 23. So that was still like 6 months before anybody even knew who we were. And then we started, talking and fundraising. So, the team really came together, but we also quickly identified all the people that we'd want to bring on very quickly once we had funds in place. So we ended up starting off the company with about 5 people. Then we added a 6th at GDC with Jason Hutchins, because when Jason's available, you hire him. Like, he is just that good. And he also, he came from being a producer type. He's our production director, but he's also a junior level designer now. And he, gets an engine, and he broke that taboo for himself and is actually having more fun doing that than any other role that he's ever had. Mm-hmm. But also our art director, we brought him back to art directing, even though he had gone executive at Gameloft. He was running content production teams of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of artists, and making sure that the quality level was good. And then he came down and has been building shaders in our game. And, it was, but in order to get these kinds of caliber of people, I made a commitment to myself, as I wanted to make sure that I could pay them before I made them do work. And that's kind of a philosophy I carry through, because I think we too easily fall into the trap of exploiting people and thinking that that's how you should be building a startup. Whereas I want my people to eat. I don't want them worried about surviving or being able to feed their kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's kind of the, it's very non-traditional, the way that we built out our team and have been going through our founding journey. And has it been completely successful? Yes and no. We're still raising, we're still trying to grow, but have we built something amazing with this in mind? And are we proud of where we spent our money? Absolutely. We did all the right things.
Yeah. Jumping back very quickly to sort of the two that you really think of as your co-founders, David and Chris. Mm-hmm. How do you guys, when you think about how you guys make decisions and deal with disagreements, what is that sort of relationship between the three of you, and sort of not power dynamic, but how does that go, right? Three humans inevitably have places where they don't always align perfectly. There's founding journeys are in every form are incredibly stressful events, right? So how do you guys come together? How do you guys process through that, and work as a team and deal with that sort of decision making and disagreements?
Well, we actually opened up the doors a little bit more, and though we have these two key people that I don't think I could have made Unleashed without, we still have Tom and Brian Birmingham, and I kind of set up the power dynamic to where, I am the tiebreaker. I make the ultimate decision but at the same time, I bring everybody's advisement in as a founding team. And one of the things that I learned with my original founding journey with the Rainbow Unicorn is that the council approach, though idealistic, it doesn't necessarily work because somebody has to make a call, period. And when you create actually a decision-making tree that requires the buy-in of, say, Chris and Dave, if they disagreed with me, and we have had these disagreements, it can actually halt progress. It can literally just stop everything until a decision is made. So you just can't live in an environment where you can't break a tie or somebody pushes back and slows you down. And then how do you push through that? So, we did set up, we don't necessarily have a solid board of directors yet. We're still too small for that. But we just have conversations and we're very transparent about the challenges. And, one of the things that has solved more problems than I think we even realized was the fact that we created an environment where it was safe to disagree. I actually, as a leader, that's how I function. When I have a perspective or I have something to share with the team, I often share it earlier so that I can get pushback. I call it farming for dissent. I'll throw it out and be like, okay, y'all, please, somebody disagree with me.
Yep.
Is this a bad idea? Because I don't know what I don't know. And I would much rather be in a world where people feel comfortable saying that I'm wrong. Because if I'm living in a world where everybody's agreeing with me, then I know somebody's bullshitting me.
Yeah. There's only a limit to how much you can go through life with everyone agreeing with you until it is actually a facade. That is can be incredibly dangerous in many ways. Let's jump slightly to the topic of fundraising. So I know you already mentioned on your story that sort of first money in was Speedrun, which you participated in Speedrun Cohort 1, I believe, right? Inaugural Speedrun, one of the first class of Speedrun, and then you've been doing some amount of fundraising and sort of going forward from Speedrun. What's been sort of two parts. One is with whatever level of detail you're comfortable sharing, right? Like not looking to pry, but could you fill in a little bit more of how you're funded beyond Speedrun, if at all? And then also, what's been the biggest difference between how you thought it would go versus what's actually happened? Like sort of going into this hey, I think fundraising works like this, and this is actually how it works.
Oh God. Oh God.
I know This is a big topic, so.
No, because I totally bought the Jason Canlis book. I bought Startup Venture Deals, and I thought I knew the assignment, and I got all the literature. I read the books. So, and we launched on our founder's journey. Probably timing wise could have been better, starting off in spring of 23. But, for the first, actually, our fundraising for 2023 was phenomenal. We raised 1.3 million. Actually, some of that we've raised in 24. But a majority of the money that we raised kind of fed off of that Speedrun investment. We were able to more than double it to really push for getting our prototype together. However, we happened to kick off our, pre-seed round at the very beginning of the down market, and the market kept going down while our ask, was this as we were asking based on the up market. And so we started lowering our ask, and the down market kept going down. And now we're in a situation of, how did somebody put it? Irena, Unleashed Games is the old house on the market. Your house has been on the market for too long, so we're working with this perception issue. But also, the market is still highly constricted. Deal flow is not, I mean, well beyond lower than even at peak, but like at normal levels. And, no matter how many times I'm not allowed to say this, I'm just going to say it, but I'm, an underrepresented founder that has to overcome additional hurdles in order to be able to, raise. So in a hot market, we would have gotten, $9 million 3 years ago for our scene. Right now, we're struggling to close a seed round because the the institutional investors in games are not investing in content and in projects. And so, in order for us to even continue, either fundraising is unleashed, or working with the market conditions as they are, we have to start pivoting into being platform and like all these other ancillary things that, though we could certainly execute on, it still doesn't meet our original mission of making that core social game. So the fundraising journey has been tough, and so much so that some of my co-founders have literally gone back to work because they have families to feed. And so, but all of them are highly motivated to jump back on board the minute that the market opens up. But, it's really, really tough under these market conditions. Like we were talking about earlier, like just because you have an idea, like there's an entire Himalayas worth of mountains to climb in order to see that idea in the hands of a player for the first time.
And I think so much of it too is what people, when people start venturing into this, there's a sort of an assumption of that, like there's people with big bags of money over there, and then it's just a normal, like almost publisher style transaction process of like there are publishers, VCs, and whoever else, and they all act the same. And it's like, actually, all of these institutions have very different motivations. There's a whole ecosystem around them, right? Like one of the things that has been a big conversation sort of in the broader space is how many VC funds there are out there that are not writing checks because they themselves can't fundraise. And so they continue to exist because they have assets under management, but they're not getting any new money in to deploy, right? And I think, sometimes the frustrating part for you and me is that they'll still take your meeting and just, fail to mention that they're not writing checks,
Yep.
So, I think, as someone who also started their company in 2023, which is, not the best of times to start a company, 2023, 2024, not great. We'll see how 2025 pans out. I have a feeling it'll be a bit of a continuation of the same, unfortunately, for at least the first half. And we'll go from there. But definitely feel you on a ton of that kind of stuff. Is there any sort of like, you sort of mentioned like, hey, I went and I did all the homework. I thought I understood the assignment. I've entered into this new round, and there's all these things that you're learning. Is there's a really big sort of lesson is probably the wrong word for it, but sort of like takeaway that you sort of have of like, hey, having been doing fundraising in one of the toughest markets, here's a lesson I would pass along about fundraising for folks who are, whether they're potentially making the regrettable decision to enter the market, or are just trying to learn more about fundraising in general, right? Because like I think the sort of meme I've often heard is to your point, like if I was fundraising in 2021, money would have fallen from the sky because that's just how 2021 worked, right? And I think there's a lot of people who raised in 2021 who didn't learn a lot of lessons about fundraising because money was just falling from the sky. And so while 2023 and 2024 may not be rich in financial outcomes, it's rich in lessons. And so, what's the biggest lesson you'd sort of pass along to folks listening of like, hey, here's, as someone who's gone through it, here's the biggest lesson about how to approach fundraising that you would give?
Right now, there's no such thing as an idea getting funded right now, unless you're in some sort of AI hype cycle pitch. But if you're building games and, great quality products, the traditional model is not working right now. It's broken. And I think the recommendation I would make is, if you do have a great idea, build it. And if you don't know how to build it, figure that out. Because the number one thing that's going to be asked of you if you're going into the fundraising environment is, well, what do people think of it? Is anybody playing it? What's your retention rate? And however much it sucks to be reduced down to a D7 retention rate, or what is your drop from D1 to D7 to D30, right? Those KPIs matter right now. And unless you can hit those marks, people are going to ignore you out of the room, right? They're going to, any meeting that you take will not end in a positive direction, because that is at least the litmus test that's being put in front of every single founder. So unless you can get over that, talking to venture investment or talking to institutional investors is not going to go in your favor. So what can you do to get there? And also, the other piece is, though you may have a great idea, venture's not going to want to hear from you unless you have some sort of hack around business model or distribution. How are you going to get it into players' hands? Solve that problem, and it doesn't matter what game you build.
Discovery and distribution, I know, are huge topics of conversation, not even just in games, but especially in games right now. And I think that's in many ways why people are less focused on content and more about platforms. It's not just business model and how you monetize. It's really about, hey, the problem to tackle is that discovery and distribution, right?
Absolutely.
So let's go turn away a little bit from Unleashed and focus back in on you very personally. So you're a founder. We're both founders. What would you describe as the primary support structures you have for yourself on the founding journey? Right? Founding journeys are stressful. They're hard. They put the weight of the business on your shoulders. Right? You and I both have lived this for about the same amount of time, and so. Where do you go to make sure that you, Irena, feel supported on this journey?
I love this question because it literally does take a village, right? I have an incredible network of either former founders or executives or people from the industry that I can literally just drop a text message to. And I've created this, I don't know if I'd call them mentors necessarily, because I'm not meeting with them, on a regular basis. It's more that I drop a text and they happen to be an expert at that particular thing. And I can ask their perspective. Hey, what do you think of this? Or, I have somebody else on a different axis. What do you think of this? And also having that, phone tree of a hype team of when, Unleashed drops a trailer, I can drop that YouTube link to a bunch of people and they can see it, they can share it, and they can help drive eyes to it. It's that sort of immediate network that has saved my life and has talked me down off of ledges, has told me that I'm doing the right thing, or even in the dark days, and you have very many of them as a founder, of, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Maybe I should just go get a cushy job and a paycheck. They're the ones that tell you to keep going.
is there a place amongst that network, or for you personally as a founder, that you feel like you don't have the support that you wish you had, right? Like where and it's not even like, oh, I just have this gap, but maybe you're actively spinning cycles to try and fill a gap for yourself so that you feel like you have comprehensive support.
Oh, I mean, there are certainly, I don't have enough people telling me to go outside and touch grass. But like the community that you've organized, Carl, on Discord of the Founder Support Network has been such like a fantastic place for like when I feel that gap,
Mm-hmm.
that like I can just sneak in there and lurk, and I'll find a thread about something that, you know, talking. I remember just a thread about player testing, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly like it just sparked this activity, and everybody was contributing feedback. Like that's where like you can have like these tiers of support, and you have your personal support network, and then having a community like you've developed is really just amazing, and thank you for doing so. But that's kind of like that's been the safety net, the net at the bottom of the trapeze,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to catch like in the worst situations. I always have some place that I can go, which is I think kind of crazy if you think about it. The fact that the internet has enabled us to be able to create these kind of communities and support each other on something that, like, imagine us 15 years ago, right, being on a founding journey. Like, where would we go?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild to think about it. I mean, like part of the genesis of that community was I didn't have that in 2017 to 2019 when I was doing this, right? Like there just wasn't as much of a group of founders out there. VC was newer into games in a lot of ways, right? And so it just wasn't as active. And so I didn't have that. And so much of this was, well, I'm damn well going to have it this time, right? So might as well go and build it. But yeah, like I think not to return us to our soapboxes very briefly, but it just goes to show how important community is, and finding people who share your perspective and your journey and can add depth to that and support you on the way. So amazing. When you are thinking about the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years for yourself and Unleashed Games, what is on that horizon that you yourself are spending a lot of cycles thinking about?
Well, right now, I mean, if I want to be, I'm maybe to a fault transparent and open, because this is a journey that I'm not the only person who's going to be on this journey, and hopefully my story has a great ending, or not even an ending, but a great next chapter
Mm-hmm.
that is in a more optimistic place. But right now is figuring out how we make ends meet while we survive through a really challenging funding climate. So I'm looking at non-traditional routes of fundraising, grants. There's, a grant cycle that's opening up through the U.S. government, where applications are due in January. So between now and then, there's a place that funds can be had. Other things, like I just got approved for the NVIDIA Inception program. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you're aware of
Congrats.
this.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you. We just got $100,000 worth of Google Cloud credits. Um, but that's literally operating costs.
100%.
And so I'm looking at ways of making Unleashed as free as possible in the short
Mm-hmm.
term, so that, I can open up our infrastructure, because our game has resonated so deeply with people who are now, some folks that are out of work, that are
Mm-hmm.
looking for some place to keep their skills sharp. I've opened the doors. I'm actually giving them a walkthrough through GitHub and getting them all access to our build. And I'm going to teach them about our branching process and our merging process. And I just recently picked up server engineer skills, and build engineer skills. So now I have
Mm-hmm.
unblocked our ability to make new builds. And we're going to still continue to develop and work those key problems, whatever the objections are from venture, do what we can to solve those and get data to be able to unlock that next step. Because you just keep going forward. You just keep moving as long as you can. And eventually the market will catch up, because I am so confident in what we are building. I'm so confident in the team that we have and what we've built so far. Because I still take it out to people. They play it and they love it.
No, I mean, I think you have a spark of something that's there, and it's just about, okay, how do you, because venture investing especially, but investing in general, is just such a weird balance of the conviction, the belief, the data, all this kind of stuff, and different markets do different things. Cool. Let me finish up the main section of the interview with my incredibly unfair question that I ask everyone, which is at some indeterminate point in the future, right? So like at some point in the future, you've moved on from Unleashed Games. You can sort of imagine whichever path you want to of how that story went. But you move on from Unleashed
really
Games.
Well. It
Exactly.
was really great. It was such a wonderful journey. I'm so glad I went on it.
Yeah. Would you start another company? Would you found another company?
It depends on how good the outcome was from Unleashed Games, right? I would probably start with more personal resources.
Mm-hmm.
I went in from an underprivileged situation where I was a game developer. I had never made the bonuses and like big bucks that a lot of my founding peers, particularly like my immediate peers in like the Southern California, Orange County, founding community, got. But I came at it with passion. And I think I would have done a lot better, and would have less stress through the process had I had my own personal resources, which makes me sad, because that says that the founding journey is a journey that's only available to those with privilege.
Yeah.
And I think I actually would be more interested in trying to solve that particular problem of using my resources to help other people build incredible businesses, do what I could to help them.
Well, maybe that's the company, right? Like that is a different form of funding journey, or founding journey, not just funding journey.
You found a fund after you become a founder?
Yeah, I mean that
she
is
sells seashells by the seashore.
There are more than a few funds out there that are from folks who have founded companies. So that is definitely a well-trodden path.
Something. Yeah. There's so many, and that's the thing. So this is the thing that's killed me about my founding journey. Less so about my own personal journey through, building my company, but it's been connecting with folks like you, and a lot of other incredible founders, many of them who you've had on this particular podcast, but really talented, amazing people with projects that aren't getting funding, projects that do deserve to see the light of day and do deserve to be supported. Like I have half of a mind just to start up a publisher, just to be able to fund all of these tiny projects that aren't that expensive, because as a game maker, I see how these projects are special, and it feels like venture's missing the boat on some of them. There's like, Heather Serlin's project, if I'm going to name drop anybody,
no, it's amazing.
Yeah. So there's so many great ideas. Like, I just want to help bring all these games to life, because the market still wants games. They will want games forever. But I feel like now we're going to have like this empty period where there won't be a ton of games other than a bunch of sequels and other big budget, like, EA remakes or whatever. So yeah, the best part about the founding journey has quite honestly been connecting with folks like you with great ideas, and projects that I'm just amazed at the creativity, and I just want to see more of it.
So the way I tend to finish off the podcast is I ask you a sort of introspection lightning round. Where these questions came from is they were the questions that I use as sort of the baseline conversation when I was co-founder dating. So when I was talking to prospective co-founders, normally after the sort of like, hey, we want to explore this, we want to talk about it. I'm like, here's a set of questions, go off, think about them, come back with your answers. We'll compare answers. We'll go through it. I am doing you the great disservice of giving you almost no time to prepare for them, but I'm going to ask you them anyway.
Let's do
Amazing.
this.
So what is your superpower?
My superpower, I can make connections between really disparate things and then bridge a path like lightning fast. Mm-hmm. It's also a great weakness because I see ideas everywhere.
Yep.
But and I also have this really evil superpower of getting other people excited about ideas too. So it can, I have to caution myself from distracting my team with this with excitement. But
yep.
Yeah.
You and I are very much kindred spirits. That is very close to how I self-describe my own superpower. Outside of your superpower, what are your biggest strengths?
I'm very gritty. I lean into, or I blame this on my Ukrainian heritage. Right. I don't really give up and just keep going. And even if the lift is very heavy, mm-hmm. I don't let that heaviness get me down. I just figure out how to do it.
That is a very good strength. What is your big weakness?
I get popcorn of ideas.
Yeah, too many ideas.
Too many ideas, and I feel like I can carry all of them at once. It's the endless optimism of, oh yeah, no, that'll be easy.
No, yeah.
I'll migrate our server to Google Cloud. Sure,
that could be that hard. Companies have been doing it for years. Surely there's a script on something.
Yeah, totally. There's a YouTube video, right?
What are your stress reactions?
Wine. No, my stress reactions. I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but I like to fix. I want to find the solution. I want to jump to solutions. But I try to rein myself in and temper myself a bit more, because oftentimes when I'm stressed, it's because I don't know enough. Mm-hmm. So I have to kind of pull back and ask myself, do I have situational awareness? Do I have the full context of the situation? And if not, what do I need to do to get there? And who do I need to talk to? Which then leans into that support network and all of that wonderful stuff.
Awesome. And what are the things that you need to have happen on a regular basis in sort of a work context or just adjacent to work context to help keep you sane, emotionally regulated? I often call it, because I'm a magic nerd, I call this upkeep needs. Like, what do you consistently need to have paid in upkeep in order to like keep yourself going?
Oh, I got you. Yeah, it's really the ancillary things. And honestly, like I lean very deeply into my spirituality, which is very Buddhist in nature. And so and I'm very philosophical as well. So I have a copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that I refer to quite often to help me get through some tough times. I make sure to breathe fresh air. Like I started calling the forest my inhaler. So when my chest gets tight and I'm stressed out, the way that I regulate is by going outside and breathing in that forest air, doing the Shinrin Yoku, the forest bathing, that helps regulate me. It's really making sure that I stay on top of those practices and my meditation and breathing for those moments when it feels like things are closing in on you. You kind of have to, I use those tools to help myself re-expand out.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for spending this hour with me. I've deeply appreciated getting uninterrupted time with you, since we normally see each other so often at conferences where it's, oh, wait, I need to go talk to this. Oh, wait, I need to go talk to this person. So it's been lovely. Here, as we close out, is there anyone you'd like to, or anything you'd like to give shout outs to, or plug, or shill, or say in this sort of open space at the end?
Yeah, I really would love to just shout out to some of the amazing female founders that I've met on this journey that have incredible projects, some funded, some not. Folks like, again, Heather Serlin, and she has been incredible. And I've only known her over a short amount of time, and getting to clue into her journey and the work that she did at Bethesda in some of my favorite games. Absolutely incredible. Jenny Zhu, who founded Talofa, is just so inspirational. I met her well before we started Speedrun, but we were in Speedrun together, and getting to see her journey and how she's blended, her love and passion for fitness into a game product just blows me away. And I feel like I'm on the sidelines of a marathon, just like you just crushing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, thinking on the fly of all of these people is really, really hard because my brain doesn't do random access very well. But, Martina Welkoff over at the WXR Fund and has been founding Goldenrod, has been an incredible support. Mark Long, CEO of Shrapnel, has been just a cheerleader for me from the very, very, very beginning of my journey. Another great friend, Hannah Lubel, who's a former Apple, Google, and Amazon exec and engineer, just continually checks in on me and makes sure that I'm okay. And it's really this community of incredible humans that does keep me going and keep fighting, for the things that I believe in, and reminding me that my dreams are not just worth believing in, they're worth chasing.
That's amazing.
And I'm sure I've forgotten so many other people. I could go on for hours about the people who have supported me in this journey. And you too, Carl, thank you for opening up that space in that founder community. And, I look forward to it growing and continuing to grow, and, making more spaces for founders as we go on this, what seems like an incredibly lonely journey, but it's not. You actually will make way more friends than you could have ever imagined.
Yeah. There are so many people here who are both on the journey beside you and willing to support you and help you and cheer you on. And it's been a joy to play a very small part in helping to connect them. So, and the last thing before we close out is, if someone heard an answer today or was really inspired by what you said and wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Oh, the best way to find me is through LinkedIn these days at Irena Pereira. You can reach out there. I really I'm trying very hard not to let out my ex profile because I just don't want to encourage people to go there. But yeah, you can find us, and you can also find us on our website, unleashgames.com. But please do reach out. And if you're on your own founding journey and want some advice, I am always here to support anybody who wants to explore it as an option, because, I will advise similarly to how I was advised. Don't. But then I'll ask, how can I help?
Yeah, exactly. Amazing. Well, thank you for spending this time. It's been great. And we'll close it out here.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the entire episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends or anyone you think could benefit from it, and leave us a positive rating or subscribe. This episode was edited by Christopher Delano, music by Jake Hull, who's available for composer work in games, And if you're interested in learning more about the Game Founders support community, go to gamefounders.org or email me at carl@gamefounders.org. Thanks so much.